The Vale of the Damned, my apartment in Willow Creek, was a sanctuary of sorts, though the walls carried a faint whiff of mildew, and the sodium glow of street lights bled through threadbare curtains. I sprawled on my sagging couch, a lukewarm beer in hand, my cat Dolly curled beside me, his green eyes glinting like twin moons in the gloom. The TV flickered, a cheap flat screen that hummed when it overheated, casting shadows that danced across my collection of vinyl records and sketches of melting clocks and warped faces. My homage to Salvador Dali. At 38, I'd carved out a quiet life, graphic design gigs, solitary evenings, a world where I needed no one but myself. I was an atheist, scoffing at tales of God, angels, or demons. They were stories for those too weak to face the void of existence, a void I'd made peace with long ago. The news anchor, Maria Torres, cut through my haze. Her voice was sharp, a requiem for the damned. Victor Kane, the Willow Creek fiend, has been sentenced to death, she said, her dark eyes boring into the camera. Responsible for 25 ritualistic murders, Kane carved occult symbols into his victims, leaving a trail of horror across our city. Authorities suspect more bodies remain undiscovered, buried in the shadows of his depravity. I snorted, shaking my head. What a sick bastard. Kane's face flashed on the screen, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and eyes like pits of coal, a visage that made my skin crawl. I reached for the remote, but the screen glitched, static clawing at Maria's image. Her face warped, eyes melting into crimson pools, mouth stretching into a jagged grin that seemed to laugh at me alone. A shadow rose from the screen's depths, not a trick of light, but a thing, a form of jagged horns and writhing limbs, its eyes twin furnaces of unholy fire. The air thickened, heavy with sulfur and rot, the stench of something ancient and profane. The shadow laughed, a sound that scraped my bones, a chorus of despair echoing beyond the stars. What the hell? I gasped, my beer slipping, shattering on the floor. Dolly hissed, bolting into the shadows. The shadow surged, a tide of ink malice, and before I could scream, it swallowed me. My apartment dissolved into a void, a cold, infinite abyss, where time and space unraveled like a tapestry torn by unseen hands. I fell through darkness, my thoughts fraying, my soul stretched thin across a cosmos that cared not for my existence. When the world returned, I wasn't on my couch. I stood in a cell, iron bars cold under my trembling hands. The air reeked of sweat and despair, the walls stained with the hopelessness of countless souls. A cracked mirror hung across from me, and I stumbled toward it, heart pounding like a war drum. The face staring back wasn't mine. It was Victor Kane's, sharp cheekbones, matted black hair, eyes gleaming with a cruelty I didn't feel. I wore an orange jumpsuit, rough against my skin, and my hands, Kane's hands, were calloused, stained with faint traces of something dark. Blood, ink, my mind recoiled, unable to name it. This isn't me. I shouted, my voice, Kane's voice, rasping like gravel. I pounded the bars, the clang echoing like a death knell in a forsaken cathedral. A guard, a hulking man with a buzz cut and a scowl carved from granite, appeared. His name tag read Daniels. Shut it, Kane, he growled, banging his baton against the bars, the sound of brutal punctuation. Nobody's buying your crazy act. I'm not Kane, I pleaded, gripping the bars until my knuckles whitened. Im Elliot Harp. I was at home watching TV, and something pulled me here. Daniel smirked, his eyes glinting with contempt. Yeah, and I'm the angel Gabriel. Sit down before I make you. I sank onto the cot, my heart a frenzied drumbeat. The cell was a tomb, a Poe-like prison of iron and shadow, its walls pressing in like the jaws of some cosmic beast. How had this happened? That thing on the TV, those eyes that laugh, it wasn't human. It was something older, something that didn't belong in my world, a Lovecraftian horror from realms beyond the stars. And now I was trapped in the body of a monster, my own life stolen in an instant. As I sat, a vision slammed into me, unbidden, vivid, a Barker-esque assault on my senses. I saw hands, Kane's hands, carving symbols into pale flesh, blood pooling in intricate patterns that pulsed with profane light. I felt a sickening thrill, a perverse joy that wasn't mine, a Howard-like rush of primal darkness. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. The shadow hadn't just stolen my body, it had woven Kane's memories into my mind, a parasitic infection that made me question who I was. Was I Elliot Harper, or was I becoming the monster I wore? Weeks bled into a purgatorial haze, each day a torment of doubt and despair. The cell was a cage for my soul, its iron bars a mockery of freedom. I pleaded with anyone who'd listen, guards, inmates, even the shrink who scribbled notes with a bored expression. Her eyes cold as the void I once embraced. No one believed me. Why would they? I looked like Victor Kane, spoke with his voice, carried his crimes in the eyes of the world. I called my sister, Claire, a librarian with a soft heart that had always anchored me. Don't call me, you monster, she sobbed, her voice breaking before the line went dead. Nate, my best friend, a bartender who'd shared countless nights laughing over beers, didn't let me finish a sentence. Lose this number, creep, he spat, the dial tone a knife in my chest. My only ally was Reggie, my cellmate, a wiry guy with a buzzed head and a habit of chewing toothpicks. He was in for boosting cars, a petty thief with a penchant for conspiracy theories, aliens, shadow governments, the works. We sat on his bunk, playing cards with a deck so worn the aces were barely legible, the air thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and despair. So you're saying a demon swapped you with Cain? Reggie asked, tossing down a jack, his toothpick bobbing as he spoke, like straight out of some horror flick. Yeah, I said, my voice, Cain's voice, low and desperate, cracking under the weight of my fear. I was on my couch watching the news, and this thing came out of the TV. Next thing I know, I'm here, looking like this. Reggie leaned back, eyeing me like I was a riddle he couldn't quite solve. Man, that's wild. I've read about body swaps on some sketchy forums, MKultra, occult stuff, but this? You got any proof you're not Kane? I threw down my cards, frustration boiling over like a cauldron. If I had proof, you think I'd be rotting in here? My sister, my friend, they'd know me if I could just see them. But I'm stuck in this damn face. Reggie shrugged, popping a fresh toothpick in his mouth. Tough break, man. You gotta find a way to show 'em it's you. Otherwise, you're just Cain to everybody. Nights were a descent into madness, a Dantean plunge into an inferno of my own making. The demon Asmodeus, its name a whispered curse in my mind, drawn from some forbidden text, haunted me. Shadows twisted in the cell's corners, forming grotesque shapes. Imps with melting faces, beasts with limbs like gnarled coral, their forms a Dali-esque nightmare of dripping flesh and warp time. You are Cain, they hissed, their voices a chorus of despair that clawed at my sanity, a Miltonic lament of fallen souls. I'd wake screaming, drenched in sweat, Cain's memory seeping into me, blood pooling beneath the arcane sigil, screams echoing under moonless skies, chants to gods whose names burned my tongue. Each vision was a wound, a Poe-like torment that blurred the line between myself and the monster. One night Asmodeus appeared in full, a towering blasphemy of smoke and bone, its eyes twin infernos that seared my soul. Its form was a Lovecraftian horror, limbs twisting like roots of an unholy tree, its presence warping the air into a surreal mirage of melting clocks and writhing flesh. You are my vessel, it intoned, its voice a symphony of cosmic dread, like the grinding of stars in a dying universe. Your world will kneel to chaos. I'm not your pawn. I screamed, clutching my head as the cell warped, walls dripped like wax. The floor pulsed like a living heart, a Carpenter-esque nightmare of a world unmoored from reality. The demon laughed, a sound that shook the bars, and the cell door groaned open, its hinges screaming like tormented souls. The air shimmered thick with an otherworldly mist that coiled like serpents, glowing with a sickly green light. The guards slumped, their eyes vacant, their bodies swaying as if puppeted by unseen strings. Shadows writhed across the walls, forming sigils that pulsed with profane energy, a sinister ballet of light and dark. The floor beneath me softened, rippling like water, and whispers filled the air, ancient guttural chants that tugged at my soul, urging me to flee. I didn't think I ran. The prison's corridors twisted, a surreal labyrinth where walls bent inward, their surfaces crawling with shadowy faces that leered and laughed. Lights flickered, casting strobing patterns that made my head spin, each step a plunge into a Barker-like abyss of flesh and madness. Doors opened and closed of their own accord, hinges shrieking, and the air grew colder, heavier as if the prison itself was a living entity, its breath hot with malice. I passed cells where inmates stared blankly, their mouths moving in unison, chanting words I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. The exit loomed, a gaping maw framed by iron, and as I burst through, the night outside was no refuge. Willow Creek streets were a labyrinth, streetlights bending like molten metal, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Faces of passers-by twisted into grotesque masks, eyes hollow, mouths stretched into silent screams. I was free, but Asmodeus's grip tightened, a sinister spell that turned the world into a nightmare canvas. I became a ghost in my own city, skulking through alleys that reeked of garbage and despair, hiding in warehouses where shadows danced like specters. The demon's visions grew worse, a relentless assault on my senses. Buildings sagged like rotting flesh, their windows weeping black ichor. Skies pulsed with unnatural hues, crimson, violet, colors that didn't belong in this world. Cain's memories clawed at me, rituals under moonless nights, sigils glowing with profane light, the stench of blood and incense thick in my nostrils. I couldn't tell what was real. Was I Elliot Harper, or was I becoming the monster whose skin I wore? The line blurred, a Poe-like torment of identity and madness that threatened to swallow me whole. Rain lashed Willow Creek one night, a storm that felt like the heavens weeping for my soul. I was shivering, my jumpsuit torn, Kane's face reflected in puddles like a curse. My body ached, my mind frayed, each step a battle against the demon's whispers. Desperate, I stumbled into a Pentecostal church, its steeple a beacon against the roiling dark, its cross glowing faintly as if defying the storm. Inside, worshippers sang, their voices a fervent hymn that vibrated in my chest, a melody of hope that felt foreign to my battered soul. The moment I crossed the threshold, the music died, the air thickening with fear. A woman gasped, clutching her child, her eyes wide with terror. It's him! The killer! Men rose, fists clenched, their fear a palpable weight, like the air before a Wes Craven jump scare. Peace, my children, a voice called, steady as an ancient oak, cutting through the chaos like a blade. Pastor Amos Wright stepped forward, his gray hair haloed by candlelight, his eyes deep as the firmament, radiating a serenity that belied his weathered face. He was in his 60s, a man who'd walked through hell and found the divine, his presence a beacon in the storm. Elliot Harper, he said, his voice piercing my panic, resonant with a truth I couldn't deny. Come to me. I froze, my heart a wild drum beat, my breath catching in my throat. How do you know my name? I whispered, Kane's voice betraying my fear, a rasp that echoed in the silent church. Amos smiled, a flicker of divine light in his eyes. The spirit sees what the flesh hides. Come, son, you are safe here. The congregation murmured, some edging toward the doors, their fear a low hum. But Amos's authority held them like a shepherd calming a flock. I staggered to a pew, my legs trembling, my body heavy with the weight of Cain's flesh. I'm not Cain, I said, my voice breaking, tears burning my eyes. A demon did this. I was just watching TV, and now I'm this. It's in my head, showing me his crimes, making me feel them. Amos sat beside me, his presence a calm in the storm, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I believe you, he said, his voice soft but unyielding, a rock against the tide of my despair. Let me share a tale of redemption, a light to guide you through this darkness. His voice was a Miltonic hymn resonant with eternal truths, weaving a parable that felt like a lifeline. There was a Lord Edmund Vance whose wealth could buy kingdoms, yet his soul was a wasteland, barren and cold. His wife Celeste wove deceit with lovers trading virtue for power, her heart a labyrinth of betrayal. His children scorned him, their eyes filled with contempt, and his friends clung only to his gold, their loyalty as fleeting as shadows. He envied his servant, Thomas, who, though poor, was rich in love with his wife, Sarah, and their children, their home a sanctuary of joy. In despair, Vance sought the divine, pleading for the joy that eluded him. I leaned forward, Amos's words a thread pulling me from the abyss, each syllable a spark in the darkness of my mind. The divine answered, Give what you have. Vance bestowed his riches upon Thomas, expecting corruption, believing wealth would taint the servant's pure heart. But Thomas and Sarah opened their home, their faith a beacon that pierced the gloom. Vance found peace, his soul ascending to the eternal good, a platonic ideal beyond the material world. Later he met Eleanor, a sculptor whose art mirrored divine forms, her hands shaping beauty from chaos. Her love, born of his sacrifice, bound them in a sacred union, blessed by the light that banishes darkness. Amos's eyes gleamed, fierce with conviction. I was like Vance, prideful, lost, a sinner accused of a crime I didn't commit. I fled, a fugitive in my own life, until a wanderer told me this parable under a starless sky. I gave my possessions to a church, and Miriam, the pastor's daughter, became my wife. Her love a gift I didn't deserve. When her father passed, I took his mantle, called by the divine to shepherd others. The light restored me, as it can restore you. Tears stung my eyes, my chest tight with a hope I hadn't dared to feel. What do? I whispered, my voice trembling. This body, these visions, they're tearing me apart. Amos leaned close, his gaze piercing my soul. What do you hold dearest, Elliot? Myself, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop it. My art, my life, I've always been enough. And the divine, he asked, his voice gentle but unyielding, a challenge that cut through my defenses. I hesitated, Asmodeus's laughter echoing in my skull, a mocking chorus that threatened to drown me. I'm an atheist, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I never thought about God. Will you surrender to the light? Amos asked, his words a beacon, a Zoroastrian spark of divine fire against the dark. Will you be baptized even in this flesh, and trust the divine to overcome the shadow? The demon's voice screamed in my mind, a cacophony of despair, but a spark flickered, a yearning for truth, a hope for redemption. Yeah, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. I'll do it. As Amos led me to the baptistry, I passed a man outside the church, standing beneath a street lamp, his wild eyes blazing like fire, his voice thundering through the storm. Prepare the way, for the fire of truth descends, he cried, his words echoing the prophet Elijah, a herald of divine wrath calling sinners to repentance. In the baptistry, a quiet man named John, his beard dripping with water, prepared the font, his presence serene yet resolute. I cleanse with water, he murmured, but the one who comes brings fire and spirit. His words carried the weight of John the Baptist, a forerunner paving the path to salvation. As I stepped into the baptistry, another figure stood in the shadows, a man with a weathered face and eyes burning with zeal. I am a prisoner of the Lord, he said softly, his voice resonant with the Apostle Paul's fervor, and I urge you to walk worthy of the calling you receive. His presence was a fleeting anchor, a reminder of grace through suffering. The baptistry was a sanctuary of candlelight, the water in the pool shimmering like a fragment of the divine, its surface rippling with an otherworldly glow. Amos stood beside me, his hand steady on my shoulder, John at the font, Paul's shadow lingering in the corner. The congregation watched, their fear softened by Amos's calm, though whispers of doubt lingered like smoke. As Amos submerged me, I felt the weight of Cain's flesh, the demon's claws in my mind, a suffocating darkness that threatened to consume me. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amos intoned, his voice a thunderclap of divine authority, and the water closed over me. A radiance erupted, a Neoplatonic ascent from the shadowed cave of flesh to the light of truth. Asmodeus screamed, a wail that shook the cosmos, its hold shattering like glass, a thousand shards of darkness dissolving into the void. I rose, gasping, my lungs burning, and saw my reflection in the water, my face, Elliot Harper's face, not Kane's. The jumpsuit was gone, replaced by my own clothes, damp but familiar, my old jeans and faded t-shirt clinging to my skin. Somewhere in a cell far away, Victor Kane reappeared, his screams a faint echo in my mind, a fading remnant of the demon's power. Amos sat me down in the church's quiet office, his face grave, his eyes heavy with a truth I wasn't ready to hear. Elliot, there's more, he said, his voice low, like a man bearing a burden too great for one soul. You and Cain are bound by blood. Your ancestor, a heretic who trafficked with demons, pledged his line to Asmodeus centuries ago, a pact sealed in blood and shadow. The demon used that curse to swap your souls, to sow chaos in this world. I knew your name because the Spirit showed me your truth, your light, a spark that darkness cannot extinguish. I stared, my mind reeling, the weight of his words a hammer against my fragile hope. A bloodline curse. It explained the visions, the memories, the demon's obsession with me. I wasn't a random victim, I was a target, marked by sins not my own, a pawn in a cosmic game that spanned generations. My hands trembled, my breath shallow, as the reality of my heritage sank in, a Howard-like burden of ancestral guilt. The days that followed were a blur of grace, a fragile reprieve from the abyss. I reconciled with Claire, who wept in my arms, her librarian's composure shattered as she clutched me in her small apartment. books strewn around us like silent witnesses. I thought you were gone, she sobbed, her tears soaking my shirt. Nate bought me a beer at his bar, the familiar clink of glasses a lifeline to my old life. Man, you got some story, he said, grinning, though his eyes held a flicker of unease. The demon's visions faded, the world no longer a Dali-esque nightmare of melting forms and twisted skies. I was baptized in the Spirit, and wherever I went, people felt it, hope, love, a spark of the divine that kindled their best selves, a Zoroastrian light against the dark that had nearly consumed me. News reached Willow Creek that Victor Kane was executed in the electric chair, his final moments marked by a chilling silence, no last words, only a cold stare, haunted the guards who witnessed it. The report came on a quiet evening. Maria Torres's steady as she announced, Victor Kane, the Willow Creek fiend, was executed at midnight. The state confirms his death, bringing closure to a city scarred by his crimes. I sat in my apartment, Dolly purring beside me, and felt a weight lift, a certainty that Asmodeus gone, banished by the power of my baptism. I threw myself into rebuilding my life, driven by a calling I couldn't name but felt in my bones. I ran for mayor, my story of survival resonating with Willow Creek's weary souls. The city embraced me, their votes a chorus of trust, and I built sanctuaries for the lost, shelters, community centers, places where hope could take root. I united neighborhoods in a brotherhood that echoed the divine order, a vision of a city where no soul wandered alone. The stars above shone brighter, a testament to the triumph of grace, and for the first time I believed I was free. But peace was a fragile illusion, a veneer over a world still touched by shadow. Months later, as I prepared for the opening of a new community center, reports surfaced of murders in nearby towns, bodies marked with occult sigils, eerily similar to Cain's. Their patterns burned into my memory from those cursed visions. The news didn't name a suspect, but each report was a needle in my spine, a whisper of dread I couldn't shake. I pushed the fear down, focusing on my speech, my vision for a city of light. But in quiet moments I felt a chill, as if eyes watched from the shadows, their gaze heavy with malice. The community center's opening was a bright afternoon, May's promise crisp in the air, the plaza filled with hundreds of faces warm with hope. Children ran through the crowd, their laughter a fleeting balm. Claire stood at my side, her smile proud, her hand squeezing mine. Nate waved from the back, holding a beer, his grin a reminder of simpler days. Pastor Amos watched from the front row, his eyes serene but piercing, as if he saw beyond the moment. I stepped to the podium, my heart full, ready to speak of redemption, of a city reborn from ashes. As I began, my voice steady, a figure caught my eye at the crowd's edge, a man in a tailored suit, tall and broad-shouldered, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. His FBI badge gleamed, his name tag reading Agent Daniel Cross, but his eyes held an unnatural intensity, a flicker of crimson that stopped my words cold. My heart pounded, a primal instinct screaming that this wasn't just a man. He pushed through the crowd, his movements deliberate, a hunter closing in, his presence a carpenter-esque shadow that chilled the air. The crowd's applause faded into a dull roar, their faces blurring as my vision tunneled on him. Elliot Harper, he said, his voice low, laced with a venom I knew too well, a cadence that echoed Kane's mocking tone. You thought you could escape me? Claire grabbed my arm, her voice a frantic whisper. Elliot, what's going on? Amos stood, his face paling, as if he sensed the same darkness I did. Nate pushed forward, his eyes narrowing, but the crowd parted, confused, their murmurs a rising tide of unease. Who are you? I demanded, my voice shaking, though I already knew. That smile, that cadence, it was Victor Kane, not in his own body, but in this agent's, like a parasite wearing a new skin, a twisted echo of Fallen's relentless evil. You know who I am, he said, stepping closer, his eyes flickering crimson for a heartbeat, a glimpse of Asmodeus's infernal fire. The chair didn't stop me, Elliot. It set me free. Asmodeus sends his regards. My blood ran cold, my mind reeling. Kane was dead, executed. Yet here he was, his soul hijacked into this FBI agent, a high-ranking figure with the power to hunt me, to destroy everything I'd built. Asmodeus hadn't been banished. It had played a longer game, transferring Kane's essence, his malice, into a new vessel, a predator cloaked in authority. The crowd's faces twisted with confusion, some backing away, others frozen in shock. Why you? I whispered, my voice barely audible, my hands trembling at my sides. Cross or Kane leaned in, his breath hot against my ear, his words a serpent's hiss. Because you're the key, Harper. The bloodline's not done with us. This city, your precious light, it's all mine now, and I'm coming for you. He pulled back, his smile widening, a blade of malice that cut through my resolve. He raised his badge, his voice booming over the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, Elliot Harper is under investigation for crimes linked to Victor Kane. Step away from him. The crowd gasped a collective intake of breath that echoed my own horror. Some shouted, others fled, children clinging to parents. Claire clung to me, her eyes wide with terror, her voice breaking. Elliot, this isn't true, Nate yelled, pushing through the crowd. This is bullshit. Amos stepped between us, his voice steady but urgent, a beacon of faith against the encroaching dark. This man is of the light, he said, his eyes locked on Cross. You have no power here, creature of shadow. Cross laughed, a sound that echoed Asmodeus's mocking chorus, a Miltonic lament of fallen pride. Oh, preacher, you have no idea what's coming. The demon's visions returned, a flash of sigils, blood in Cain's hands, now crosses, carving new horrors, a Barker-esque tableau of flesh and despair. The crowd's faces blurred, their voices a cacophony of fear and confusion. Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in like hounds on a scent. Cross's hand rested on his gun, his eyes locked on mine, a promise of chaos, of a hunt that wouldn't end. I stumbled back, my world unraveling, the city I'd sworn to save slipping through my fingers like sand. I gripped Amos's arm, my voice a desperate plea, my heart pounding in my chest. What do I do? He looked at me, his eyes fierce with faith, a Zoroastrian fire that burned against the dark. Run, Elliot. The light is with you, but the battle's not over. Trust in the divine, and you will find the way. I turned to Claire, her face pale, her hands trembling as she whispered my name. Nate stood firm, his fists clenched, ready to fight for me. But Cross took a step forward, his smile a blade, his badge a shield for his malice. The sirens grew louder, a wail that matched the scream in my soul. I ran, my legs burning, my breath ragged, the crowd parting like a sea of fear. The community center's plaza blurred behind me, Willow Creek's streets stretching into a labyrinth of shadows. Asmodeus and Cain were out there, in a body with the law's power, a hunter cloaked in authority, and they wouldn't stop until they claimed me, or I found a way to end. The sky above pulsed with an unnatural hue, a crimson stain that promised more horrors to come, and I knew this was only the beginning.